Hello, everybody. So, this is kind of the second part of our little kind of talks that Pastor Rick and I are going to be doing about some different topics that are maybe somewhat more challenging, that we're kind of offering resources and just kind of some insights for folks that are involved with our small group leadership program. So, Pastor Rick, he did a video that I sent out a little while ago about uh, the inerrancy of Scripture. And so, this one today, we're going to be doing a topic about Christian sexual ethics. So, when we met together early on, kind of in this small group term, we talked about different topics that people would be interested in. We came up with a list of different topics and had people vote on them. And also, we had people kind of offer their own suggestions. And this was the topic that kind of got the second most number of votes. So this is the one we're doing second. So we're gonna tackle this and try to take this topic on Christian sexual ethics. So I think that there are really three main foundations of traditional Christian doctrine that are at odds with the current zeitgeist of our culture. So that's kind of the current kind of just thinking or paradigm that our culture operates in. Um, I think that there's three areas in particular where Christian theology, Christian doctrine, traditional teaching really kind of comes at odds with our culture today, and just how our culture relates to the church and thinks about the church. It really kind of struggles and kind of butts heads with these three issues. One of them is the exclusivity of Christianity. So, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." So this idea or concept that the only way to salvation is through Jesus, the exclusivity of Christianity. So a lot of people in our culture today really struggle with that, and the church is teaching on that. A second topic is the doctrine of hell, the idea that there is um, a, a definite eternal punishment for those who are outside of Christ's salvation. A lot of people struggle with that. And then the topic that we're going to be dealing with here, Christian sexual ethics. So let's take that on, this topic of Christian sexual ethics. So God created the universe and all that is in it, including sex. He designed us and knows how we work best and will be most fulfilled and able to glorify Him. The Bible, among other things, is like our instruction manual for life from the one who designed us. By following this instruction manual, we afford ourselves the best opportunity to live the most fulfilling and God-honoring life possible and reduce suffering and brokenness. Sadly, I think if you look at things today, you'll see that our culture is really moving further away from God's ideal for sex and becoming more depraved. We see this really beginning in the 1960s in the Western Hemisphere and in kind of Western culture with the sexual revolution, with the increasing acceptance of premarital sex and promiscuity. It was the age of free love. At first, it was acceptable, viewed as just kind of acceptable to have sex as long as two people loved each other. As long as two people loved each other was viewed as, okay, it's okay if they have sex when they're not married, as long as they really love each other. But then it kind of moved and morphed into that as long as both consented, as long as it was two consenting adults, it was fine. Increasingly, any restrictions on sexual fulfillment became viewed as repressive and puritanical. And this has evolved into greater acceptance and normalization of homosexuality, culminating in same-sex marriage becoming the law of the land in the United States in 2015. The Supreme Court ruled that. Currently, we are immersed in a transgender revolution where the entire concept of gender is being redefined. What we see is that each generation is becoming increasingly confused sexually and more depraved. For example, within the past 10 years, there's been a dramatic increase in children becoming or claiming to be transgender or non-binary. And just to let you know, as part of the video presentations that I'm going to be releasing, I'm also going to release an outline of this that offers a lot of scriptural references as well as citations and sources that you can look at. And one of the sources in there is going to be a paper about some studies that were done in the United Kingdom about just the increasing almost like an epidemic of girls, young ladies, teenagers, and even younger, claiming to be transgender, feeling like they're transgender. Just anecdotally, I'll just say too that my wife is a high school guidance counselor, and she's just kind of shared with me that just she'll say like almost all or just all the kids that she's talking to are struggling with these issues, struggling with issues of either transgender identities or struggling with their sexuality and their sexual orientation and identity in general. And I've talked to other people anecdotally too who have shared with me that just like in the healthcare profession, dealing with sexually transmitted diseases and stuff, people who come into them to see them in their health clinics and stuff, that just like something like 3/4 of them, 75% of them are struggling with gender identity and sexual orientation issues. So this sounds like what the Apostle Paul describes to me in Romans chapter 1, 18 through 32. And I just want to read that passage to you because I really think that we can see this really taking hold in our age. So beginning in verse 18, Paul says, "The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore God gave them over to their sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with men and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invented ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. Although they know God's righteous decrees that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them." I think when we look at that passage, we see really kind of a striking example of what we're experiencing today in our culture. We see that kind of increasing cascade of depravity. And we see that a lot of it was rooted in really denying the truth and reality of God, And instead of looking at God, really substituting God for materialism, for the created world, and basically kind of worshiping the created world instead of the creator. So kind of worshiping this counterfeit for what was really the glory and majesty of God. And that cascaded into what we see is increasing sexual depravity and then other types of depravity beyond sexual depravity. I think a lot of times people kind of think as sexual depravity is kind of worse or beyond what other sins are, but that's not necessarily what this passage shows. This passage shows this increasing cascade of sins, and sexual depravity is part of it, but it goes beyond that and really we see that even beyond that is things like malice, gossip, disobeying parents, all sorts of things that are just as bad, maybe even worse, and more depraved according to this passage. What we also see too is that our culture is not the first culture to experience this. Paul wrote this about 2,000 years ago, and he wrote it to the Church of Rome. And what he was talking about was not something that was new, even in the days of the Roman Empire. This type of behavior, this type of depravity was seen in ancient Greece. It was seen in the ancient Canaanite cultures. It was seen in Sodom and Gomorrah and many other cultures and times and places throughout humanity. Such types of things have been seen, this kind of cascade of depravity when a culture, when a people actively rejects the truth and teachings of God. What may be unique about our culture, though, is that our culture in the United States, as well as Western Europe, may be the first post-Christian cultures that have been exposed and kind of grounded on the bedrock of Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Ours might be the first cultures to really kind of experience this after having gone through that. So this is kind of basically an introduction to kind of what we're going to be talking about, to kind of whet our palates, kind of get us kind of into the mindset of thinking about this. What's going to come after this is that there is going to be, I think it's four. There's going to be 4 videos after this. The first video that I'm going to release after this is basically going to talk about why God designed sex in the first place. So what was his intent and purpose behind sex? So that'll be the next video that I'll release. After that, I'll talk about what the biblical standards are regarding human sexuality. So we'll take a look at what the Bible actually says about human sexuality. And then in particular, a topic that's really difficult and that the church is really struggling with today and trying to deal with and also relate to people in our culture is dealing with homosexuality. And so we're going to take a look at a biblically based Christian response to homosexuality. And within that, we'll deal with transgender issues as well. We'll take a look at that. And then the final video is what I call the big lie. And we'll take a look at this idea of how Satan is really deceiving us and deceiving our culture in a lot of ways. And that the ultimate goal of that deception is to lead us away from Jesus, to point us away from Jesus and our need for Jesus and his salvation and grace, and lead us elsewhere and take us away from that. And how we really need to confront that and be real about that. And how we should respond to that. So that's what we're going to be talking about in these upcoming videos. I hope you're able to take some time to watch them and enjoy them. And I'm also, like I mentioned, there's also an outline that I'm sending along with these. So use that as well. And I hope that this can be a really good resource that people can use and that we can have further dialogue about this. If you have questions, concerns, or issues about anything in here, feel free to contact me or Pastor Rick about any of these issues, and we can try to talk about them more thoroughly and just kind of help in guiding the conversation. So thanks very much. I look forward to talking to you some more in the other videos.